In the wake of Booster 18's explosive demise, SpaceX has been accelerating the construction of the next version 3 Super Heavy booster, which begs the question, when might Flight 12 actually be ready for launch? It may have been a holiday week here in the US, but Starbase, as we know, never sleeps, which means we have an action-packed episode for you on this week's Starbase Update, sponsored by Novium. Let's go ahead and start off with the primary story from last week, as it's still ongoing. Following the debut of Booster 18 from Mega Bay 1, it was rolled out to masses for its cryogenic testing campaign. Unfortunately though, things didn't exactly go according to plan, as after commencing its first gas system pressure test, it suffered an anomaly that blew the LOX tank completely open. Now, since Booster 18 obviously has no chance of reaching flight worthiness at this point, SpaceX had to get around to safing it and then unfortunately begin scrapping it. Despite the transfer tube somehow holding it upright, the risk of collapsing on itself was still present, so as discussed last week, SpaceX started by rolling the V3 booster lifter out to masses from the production site. Once on site, the lifter was attached to Booster 18, and then the scrapping process began with the methane tank section being removed first, then lowered and cut into pieces, making it unusable for other vehicles. However, it's still possible that the truss section could in theory be used elsewhere, though unlikely. With that out of the way, crews then removed the common dome section by cutting the transfer tube out from the bottom of the common dome, followed by a section of the mangled LOX tank. Once that was removed, a large section of the transfer tube became accessible, which crews then cut and removed, then allowing the attachment of the Wiffle tree load spreader to the rest of the LOX tank for further scrapping. With the demise of Booster 18, we've seen SpaceX begin the stacking of Booster 19, and crews appear to be moving at an accelerated pace, with already 3 ring sections inside of Mega Bay 1 within 4 days. The loss of 18 was undoubtedly a setback, but it's nice to see the sense of urgency SpaceX has to get version 3 up and running so quickly, with 19 coming together. But of course, you need more than just super heavy barrel sections to complete a stack. Arguably the most critical piece of the V3 puzzle is the Raptor 3 engines, which SpaceX needs 39 of for a full stack between the booster and the ship itself. So on that note, it's time for our McGregor Minute. Last week, SpaceX seemed to only perform 5 Raptor tests, suggesting a slight pace drop than what we're used to. More excitingly, however, we spotted a trailer with 4 Raptor 3s on board, serial numbers 68, 67, 66, and 65, with 68 being the highest we've spotted so far. That being said, it is likely that SpaceX has already produced Raptor 3s with serial numbers into the 70s. And if a majority of those are flight articles, that would mean SpaceX now has most, if not all of the engines required to support Flight 12. Later in the week, another trio of Raptor 3s rolled by, though we couldn't spot their numbers. One of the 5 Raptor tests this week lasted approximately 388 seconds, or 6 minutes and 28 seconds. This was most likely a verification test for a ship Raptor, as 388 seconds is just over the approximately 380-second burn time that we observed for Ship 38's descent on Flight 11. This also tops the 360-second burn that we saw last week on the 18th of November. A broken Raptor 3 was also seen by our cameras this week, as it could potentially be the same Raptor engine that experienced a RUD at one of the test stands. Now, it might be difficult to understand what you're looking at here, so let's break it down. It's a single sea-level engine which has been split in 2, with the power head sitting on the right-hand side of the trailer. It kind of looks like a vacuum-optimized Raptor, but I can assure you it's not. And speaking of RVACs, the only one that we've seen still is serial number 8. SpaceX appears to be taking its sweet time testing them, presumably because of the issues apparent on engines during previous flights. Alongside engine testing, SpaceX is continuing to upgrade some of the test stands themselves at McGregor, with a new vaporizer and vertical tanks arriving. However, the vertical tanks didn't stick around the site for very long, as they pretty much left as quickly as they arrived, so kind of confusing. But also with more engine testing, you'll also want more water to cool and absorb the exhaust from Raptor engines. And last week, SpaceX completed their new large water tower, which increases their water capacity for said testing. Now, before getting back to Starbase, let's go ahead and continue our detour and head to Florida Space Coast. Kind of biased, because there has been a huge amount of Starship news developing at both the Kennedy Space Center and the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Last week, we saw what looked to be parts of a new booster quick disconnect hood rolling towards Launch Complex 39A. We should eventually see another for the second BQD, as the new Starship launch mount design requires twin BQDs, one for the oxygen side and then one for the methane side, same as Pad 2 in Starbase. Speaking of propellants, last week also saw 3 big subcoolers being delivered to LC-39A. These help to chill the oxygen and methane down to their cryogenic temperatures required for flight. So it's nice to see this infrastructure coming together here. These subcoolers are far larger than anything SpaceX has used in the past. In fact, these are the same that are used at larger LNG plants, or liquid natural gas. This week saw yet another subcooler delivered to Pad A as well, and also some cryoplumbing. This plumbing is what connects the various tanks and subcoolers, etc., to the actual pad, allowing for propellant loading and transfer to occur during flight or wet dressed operations. Another critical piece of infrastructure needed to support prop load on Starship is the Ship Quick Disconnect Arm, or SQD, located about halfway up the tower itself. This week we observed some work around where it'll eventually be mated to the actual tower itself at 39A, likely in preparation for its eventual lift and installation. If this follows a similar timeline to Pad 2 and Starbase, it's unlikely that we'll see it roll to the pad anytime soon. But when that time comes, we will likely see either the LR-11,000 or LR-13,000 conducting the lift, as both are capable, but maybe not so much with the LR-11,000, as it isn't configured the same as the LR-11,000 in Starbase. How many times can you say LR-11,000? Speaking of cranes, 2 new crane sections arrived at the launch complex, which are likely for the LR-11,000 itself. SpaceX often likes to use the LR-11,000 due to the heavy loads they often have to move, as we sure see a lot of them in Starbase. We also have brand new satellite imagery of LC-39A and other pads from our very own Harry Stranger, giving us a great top-down view of the progress made on the Starship infrastructure here. Now, we're talking about cranes and lifting and things being in the air. Let's go ahead and take a moment to hear about today's video sponsor, Novium.
What's up, y'all? You're probably wondering why there's a hover pin in my CNC. Well, all my other surfaces are busy, and this was the easiest one to clean out. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to spin it. What's actually going on is you still need to get a gift for somebody. Maybe it's you. And so this video sponsor, Novium, sent one for me to check out. Now, this one here is a Hoverpin Interstellar, and if you've seen it on other channels, you probably know that it's got like a Time Magazine award or something. But here, you probably want to know what I think about it. Personally, I'm a huge fan of science-related gifts, and I fidget with stuff on my desk. It comes in a few different colors: Space Black, Starlight Silver, Neptune Blue, and Mars Magma. This one's Mars Magma, you could tell, because it's red. And if you get one as a gift, you get to rattle off all sorts of cool facts. Like the magnets, both in the pin and the ring surrounding it, are perfectly balanced to make it hover, hence the name. The Interstellar is also at a jaunty 23.5 degree angle, representative of the Earth's axial tilt. They're made of aircraft-grade aluminum, and you don't have to plug them into anything to make them work. If you get the Meteorite edition, you can actually talk about how you can see the actual iron crystals that can only really form in microgravity. And the meteorite that it's made from is probably older than the Earth itself. Take that, diamonds. Also, it writes, if you're into that. There's also the Hoverpin Future, which actually has interchangeable tips and a 60-degree angle. That one's available in deep black, frost silver, or mist blue. If you know somebody who'd like this on their desk, or I don't know, you just want one, here's the deal. For the next 48 hours, you can get 20% off all Hoverpins with the code NSF. Or click on the link in the description. There's free shipping to most countries, and I've been watching this for a while, and this is pretty much the best deal I've ever seen on them. And as a gift, it's actually really cool. You can just wrap it up because the box it comes in is pretty neat. If you think it's cool, give it a click, check it out, and mark one more thing off your gift list this holidays. Let's get y'all back to Starbase Update.
The big news on the Space Coast this week is that SLC-37's final environmental impact statement, otherwise called an EIS, has finally been approved and released. There are a few interesting points here that we should cover in a table with some surprising information, to say the least. And right off the bat, this EIS permits SpaceX to launch and land up to 76 Super Heavy boosters and ships alike per year, in parallel with up to 76 static fires of both ships and boosters. Kind of selfishly for us photographers, we're also glad to see that roughly half of those will be during daylight hours. But holy cow, that's 152 landings total annually. 37 will be the second approved launch site for Starship in Florida, but the lease itself may still need to be officially signed from the Space Force if it hasn't already. In fact, it has to be in order for the official construction to start beyond the demolition of old hardware and land clearing that we have seen to this point. Oh yeah, and they still have to build the entire launch complex anyway. On this official layout of the complex, we can see that nothing has really changed from the draft EIS that was published back in June of this year. there are 2 separate pads with the associated water deluge equipment, isolation and purging hardware, launch towers, launch mounts, tank farm, etc. And if we move over to the tank farm, we even have numbers on how much propellant SpaceX plans to store at 37, with liquid oxygen capacity set to approximately 16,500 tons, liquid nitrogen at 6,500 tons, and liquid methane set at 5,000 tons. This all adds up to about 2.5 launches worth of commodities, and is likely a similar amount to what SpaceX will eventually have at LC-39A once their tank farm is finished. Of note, this is about twice the storage capacity that SpaceX currently has at their Starbase launch site for both pads. To help with the propellant storage, SpaceX will be building a methane liquefier and natural gas area to be able to produce their own methane on site rather than trying to truck all of it in, which takes a lot of time and I'm sure isn't cheap. The natural gas area will be used to purify the pipeline quality natural gas to then be made into gaseous methane, and then you can kind of complete the loop from there. This gas will either then be used on site for power generation or to be condensed into liquid methane propellant itself. For the other commodities like oxygen, nitrogen, and even argon, SpaceX will build an air separation unit, or ASU, near the old horizontal integration facility at SLC-37. These essentially take air from the atmosphere and separate out the various gases, then use a cooling tower to condense and purify them into liquids for cryogenic storage. One point of note that is missing from the proposed launch site plan are the proposed catch towers, landing pads, and ship static fire stands. As it stands now, pun not intended, they will likely be added once the initial construction of the launch facilities is well underway and SpaceX decides their final location inside the pad perimeter. A sweet new addition in the final EIS was a mapped breakdown of the leased areas, see Figure 2.1. SpaceX's lease, of course, would include the designated pad area, but also includes additional parcels around SLC-37's horizontal integration facility. In parcel C to the northwest of it, there will be an air separation unit, as we have already discussed, but Parcel B doesn't line up with any specific new infrastructure, at least as of yet. SpaceX now has a lot of extra room here to house various infrastructure for Starship on multiple fronts. Now let's go to a particular table, 3.14-1. This table covers all proposed and approved launches in the future that could interact with the no action alternative, which would be if SLC-37 wasn't approved. This table includes Falcon 9 from SLC-40 and LC-39A, Falcon Heavy from LC-39A, SLS from LC-39B, Terran R from LC-16, New Glenn from LC-36, and Atlas V and Vulcan from SLC-41. There is also NASA SLCV, or Small Class Launch Vehicles, from LC-48, but there hasn't really been any movement or takers on that project as of now. One missing launch provider is Stoke from LC-14, but they have a different setup for launching, as their rocket is more of a developmental program, kind of like Starship is right now. The glaring oddity from this table is that it states no daytime launches of Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy from LC-39A or SLC-40. And when we say none, we mean zero. Literally a goose egg. Another oddity is that the launch rate numbers for SLC-40 are old. The table says 70, and recently SpaceX was approved for 120. And perhaps the strangest of all is that at the top of the table it says no action alternative for launch, landing, and static fire test operations at KSC and the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which could mean that this table is in place if they didn't plan on approving Starship to launch from SLC-37. But that doesn't make any sense, because why would there be no daytime Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy launches? Other than those bits of information, not much has changed in between the draft EIS and the final EIS overall. Now it's up to SpaceX and the Space Force to actually sign the lease, and then SpaceX can formally begin their construction at SLC-37. The EIS states that this construction will take 12 months. But based on Pad 2 at Starbase, which is currently at 20 months or so, and still not finished, 12 months seems a bit optimistic to build 2 full launch pads and a full tank farm. Of course, these 2 launch pads will be SpaceX's 3rd and 4th of this design, so things will likely go a bit quicker and smoother at that point, considering the lessons learned from prior builds. If construction starts in Q1 of 2026, SpaceX could have 4 or 5 operational Starship launch pads by Q2 or Q3 of 2027. Now, also take into consideration that there will also soon be 2 operational gigabays and eventually 2 operational star factories as well, one of each in Starbase and here at Roberts Road. Speaking of Roberts Road, the fourth and final tower crane for the Florida Gigabay has received its boom and the bay itself continues to grow rapidly. Simultaneously, the third level of steel columns have begun installation on the west side. This is the side that will likely be connected to the Star Factory 2.0 here, of course, once that's built and assembled. Remember, Gigabay itself will allow SpaceX to rapidly produce ships and boosters, as well as process and refurbish them after flight for eventual reuse. All of this comes together well with the recently approved EIS for SLC-37, as rapid reusability is one of the key goals with Starship overall. Alright, I hope y'all enjoyed the detour because now we have to come back to Starbase and talk about the final version 2 booster's demise, Booster 17, as well as what's next for version 3. Over the last week, we noticed signs that SpaceX was likely starting to prepare for Booster 17's scrapping, considering that they began removing components to make the process a bit easier. Firstly, SpaceX removed the cap off of Booster 17, which was mainly used for storage as it protects its forward section. Keeping a sterile and clean environment is important when you're right next to a large, salty body of water, as Starbase is itself right next to the Gulf. Once removed, SpaceX started stripping the shine sections from Booster 17, which are used to cover the composite overwrap pressure vessels, or COPVs, and other external components on the booster. With them out of the way, access to remove the COPVs was pretty simple. Removing those at this stage can make the scrapping process easier, as there will be less hardware to avoid once you break out the blowtorches. Booster 17 waited patiently until Booster 18 left Megabay 1 for Massey's for its cryogenic testing campaign before moving in. Foreshadowing. The next day, we saw SpaceX cutting above the common dome of Booster 17, and not long after, its LOX tank made its way out of Megabay 1 and into the ring yard. Strangely, after some time, we saw the LOX tank go back into Megabay 1 and then left once again shortly after. Why did they do this? Your guess is honestly as good as mine. Later that night, we saw the first section of Booster 17's methane tank appear. More specifically, the fourth section of the methane tank was moved out of Megabay 1 and then transported all the way to the scrapyard, which is where other sections will join it later. In the following days, we watched as the last few sections of the methane tank were cut and rolled out of the Megabay and into the ring yard. The LOX tank section of Booster 17 followed soon after. The booster transport stand eventually made its way out of Megabay 1 with only the booster's aft section, which was rolled to the rocket garden and is now parked where it sat before. With the aft section cut from the LOX tank, all that was left of the LOX tank were the main barrels and the common dome section, which is how SpaceX would normally scrap a fully complete booster. So with that, rest in peace Booster 17, even though you never flew and you were not, I don't know. Rest in peace Booster 17. With 17 finally removed from Megabay 1, the window for SpaceX to really start focusing on further stacking Booster 19 opened, and they seem to be taking full advantage of it. Despite all the booster-focused destruction and scrapping this week, Booster 19 has made an appearance in the line, as indicated by a tweet from SpaceX, which suggests that they plan to stack Booster 19 within a month, being confident in the fact that they can still hit their target for Starship Flight 12, which currently stands as a Q1 2026 occurrence. Earlier this week, we spotted the first section of Booster 19 rolling out, but seemingly in a different order this time around than what we're used to. It's an aft 2 section when we normally see the common section roll out first, but this time around it was the other way around. It then made its way from Star Factory into Megabay 1. A day later, SpaceX rolled out the common dome next, which was then loaded into Megabay 1. This made Booster 19's LOX tank only 7 rings out of the total 25 rings tall. With that being said, we expected to see Booster 19's aft 3 section roll out, which will make the stack a total 11 out of 25 rings tall. Only 2 days later, SpaceX then rolled out the most recent section of Booster 19, which turned out to be aft 3, rolling out of Star Factory. Following the other 2 sections, it made its way into Megabay 1. We are currently expecting the next section of Booster 19 to roll out within the next couple of days following the aft 3 section, if it hasn't already by the time of recording. In terms of what's next, we could expect the aft 4 section of Booster 19 to follow. Depending on how long this takes, we could very well see 19's completion by the end of the year, at least in terms of stacking. It's all in SpaceX's hands. Completing it in December seems optimistic, but SpaceX is giving their all to achieve it. We call it the SpaceX Steamroller for a reason, but do you think it'll be stacked by the end of 2025? Feel free to let us know in the comments section down below. Moving away from the booster side of things, during the middle of the night, we noticed something strange rolling out. It isn't a barrel section or a nose cone, but a methane header tank for a ship, which is quite odd. The last time we'd seen a ship header tank leave Star Factory was during the early Block II Starship era, and that was transported to McGregor to proof test the design of the new header tank system, since it was changed a lot compared to the last generation of header tanks on previous ships. But seemingly after some time, the same header tank rolled back from Sanchez into Star Factory. Maybe it was just taking a walk for some fresh air, or it tried to escape and got caught, we have no idea. Over at the launch site, activity here seemed limited, but of course never at a standstill. Starting off with Pad 1, we saw SpaceX start making similar cuts on the right chopstick as to what we've already seen with the left, which gave us the sign that they'll soon be shortening it to its optimized length. And not long after, the end section was indeed cut off, and the two sticks at Pad 1 were of matching length, both with each other and also now with those at Pad 2 and LC-39A. Speaking of which, Pad 2 has been getting some attention recently, as SpaceX will need Tower 2 in full working order to go ahead with their next flight attempt and for version 3 as a whole. Since Tower 1 is down to be reconfigured to match Tower 2, we won't be seeing any launches from Tower 1 until the reconfiguration is complete. So the rest of the launches coming next year will either be from Pad 2 or LC-39A. In terms of progress, Pad 2 is coming along fairly well, with noticeable progress seemingly on the launch mount itself and the ship quick disconnect arm. We expect to see the launch mount work finish up soon, and it's looking really clean now with all the scaffolding out of the way. After SpaceX lifted the SQD shoulder onto Tower 2, SpaceX also gave the BQD some attention, specifically the LOX BQD, which saw its hood removed a few weeks ago, thinking that they would then install hardware that sealed the BQD and was lying around the pad. After SpaceX tested the retraction and extension of this QD, SpaceX reinstalled the hood onto it seemingly without any hardware modification. It is unknown why SpaceX decided to not install the hardware that is laying around the pad, but it is likely that we could see both BQDs having their hoods removed to install said hardware at a later date. Moving back onto one of the other key components of Tower 2, the ship quick disconnect arm, it was recently installed onto Tower 2 by SpaceX's LR-11000 crane. Shortly after its lift, they installed the actuator that is used to extend and retract the arm. Later that morning, we spotted the arm come to life as it rotated itself towards the tower, showing some signs of life shortly after installation. But this isn't all for the ship QD arm. It's still missing one key component. The forearm is the other bit of hardware that is required. It houses key components for fueling the ship and is currently sitting at the Sanchez lot being outfitted with the required hardware. Now let's turn our attention to Massey's for a bit, because while Booster 18 is being dismantled, one of the more crucial components for Block 3 ship testing is in place. On Tuesday, November 25th, Ship 39.1 made its way through the Sanchez lot and onto Highway 4. Now, usually we would have seen some sort of road closure posted for this kind of activity, but we didn't notice anything posted. Not entirely surprising though, considering this isn't the first time that's happened. They then rolled it out to Massey's, and afterwards it was set down between the two current Block 3 booster test tanks, which have been previously tested. It is unknown when they will do any testing of Ship 39.1, but expect it within the coming weeks, as it is one of the key components that needs to be tested before Flight 12. Though we know teams over there likely already have their hands full with Booster 18 at the moment, in addition to finishing the required work for the ship static fire stand after Ship 36 did what it did. The test campaign for S39.1 will include cryogenic proof testing, thrust simulation testing on the aft section, and at some point, the second can crusher cap that was built will likely be installed on the top of the test tank. In order to accommodate this, the ship's cryostand will have to be further modified to be able to use the cap to crush the test tank. After S39.1 has finished with its test campaign, and all goes well, we should expect it to roll back to the production site to be taken off of the current stand, and depending on how it is in terms of readiness, it will be set onto the cryostand itself to be rolled out for its cryogenic proof test campaign. It was a pretty slow week at Starbase since it was the week of Thanksgiving here in the US. But all things considered, a lot still needed to get done, as the SpaceX steamroller never stops. Thanks to Novium again for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the link in the description to get 20% off your hover pen for the next 48 hours. When do you think SLC-37 will be ready for launches? Or in that case, even Pad 2 itself, with the recent Booster 18 fiasco affecting scheduling for version 3? Feel free to let us know in the comments section down below. I'm Max Evans for NSF, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.